Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to show you something that quite annoyed me last week in my normal day job, and this is how we can configure the app service with Microsoft Authentication, but we're not using the Azure portal like the documentation shows, and we're also going to use managed identities. This means we don't have any passwords, this means it's going to be secure, and we also don't have any expiring passwords. As I said, it annoyed me quite a lot because the documentation is just like click here in the portal and set this password and you're done. But in reality, we want to use infrastructure as code, we want to use managed identities, and this was surprisingly way harder than I expected. So I thought I'd share my experience and hopefully it benefits someone of you. So the first thing is I'm going to give you a very quick introduction of the app service authentication, like how it looks in the portal, what it is, and then we're going to focus on the demo. As always, if you're interested in the code or the slides, you can scan the QR code or you will find the link in the description down below. So now with the app service authentication, what we have to do is, or actually what it is we can configure authentication, and this way our app service is only accessible if we log in with our Entra user. It is very easy to set up. If you do it in the Azure portal and you have the right permissions, it takes like a minute and it just works. You don't really know why, but it just works. And what's working or happening behind the scene is that creates an app registration, and then this app registration is used to log into the app service. If you do it in the Azure portal, you have to configure credentials. This means you have to set a password. The password will expire by default after 180 days. This means in half a year, you won't be able to log in into your web app anymore. In the Azure portal, it's not possible to use the managed identity. So we have to find a way around. Also, what I meant before is like if you have the permissions, since it's creating this app registration, which is an Entra object, you also have the permission in Entra to create this. And in organizations, usually developers don't have any permissions in Entra. So this is already where the developers stuck. So they have to open a ticket with the IT support, they create it, they send the password back, and yeah, it's just a mess. Talking about passwords, in Azure or in general, you should avoid passwords wherever possible. The passwords expire, they might get exposed or leaked. They're a pain to store safely. Like usually you have to store them in a key vault, but then your app service has to reference the key vault. You have to set up all of this. So it's just a pain, and the better solution is to use managed identities. And the thing that bothered me the most is using infrastructure as code for all of this is kind of hard. Like once you figure it out and you have a template, it's easy. But with the documentation, it's quite hard to figure out what's happening. So if we take a look at the portal, so we have here our app service, and on the left side with the authentication, if you open this, it just asks you to add an identity provider. Then you can select from the list a whole bunch of identity providers like Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Google, and so on. And then you configure it. For example, with a name, how long the password should be valid or when it expires, if only members of your tenant are allowed to log in or also others. And once you're done with this, Azure will set up everything for you if you have the permissions. But as I said, we want to do everything by code. And to do this, I'm going to show you today how we can do it with Bicep. One thing is we're going to create the app registration by hand. Usually you would also want to have this by code, but today I want to focus on the developer perspective. And since they often don't have the permissions, they would create a ticket, then the IT sets up the app registration, and then the developers set up their application with code. So that's what we're going to do today. With this, now let's switch over to the Azure portal. Let's create the app registration and then deploy our app service. Here in the Azure portal, I opened Entra and we can find here app registrations. Then we click on new registration. We provide the name. For example, my secure app. Then we configure what tenants we want to use. For example, only my tenant or multiple, so I just use mine. Then the redirect URI. This is how the redirect after the login works. There we are going to use web. And then I'm pasting the URL for this. So this is HTTPS. Then the URL of the app service. In my case, I'm going to use my secure app wolfgang.azurewebsites.net. And then what's important is that you have this and, if we can see it, with the .auth/login/aad/callback. This is just something Azure needs. Then we register this, should only take a second, and now we can configure it. Before we configure it, we are going to copy this application ID or client ID because we're going to need it later. Then we're going to take a look at the authentication. So here we can see we have already our callback URL defined. And under settings, we set these ID tokens. So this allows our users to log in. The app registration itself is like one of the most complicated things I think Entra has, and nobody really understands how it works. So I'm just going to rebuild what Azure would create by itself if you create it in the Azure portal. If you're interested, we can go into all the details in another video, so just let me know about this. The last thing we have to configure is under the app permissions. There we can see we already have one here. So we have to add another one. And to do this, we select expose an API, we add a scope, then we just add this default application ID. And once we've done this, we can add our scope. So the scope name, I'm just going to use user_impersonation. Then you can configure who can consent to this. This is the first time somebody logs in, either a user and an admin, or only an admin can consent that the app registration is allowed to do this action. So I just say everyone is allowed. I'm an admin, so it doesn't matter, but in this case, I just say everyone. Then you can send a message for the admin. So I just write consent display and consent description. That's not relevant right now. Then the user consent display name. You can again configure something. We'll see it later. And that's already everything we have to do. The last thing, what we have not done yet, what we also can't do yet, is the secret or the credentials. Usually, if you do it in the Azure portal, it just creates a new secret here. So you provide a random name and for how long it is valid, and it will give you the secret. Then you copy the secret, give it to the developer, and they can use it. But as you can see here, it will expire in half a year. This means somebody has to think about it, or I have to make a ticket in 6 months to renew it. If you have 100 app registrations, this means you have to renew all the time secrets. Also, you just saw the secret, and if I wouldn't delete it until I publish this video, you could just use it. So I'm going to delete this, and the better option would be to use Federated Credentials. That's a concept of Azure where you can use a managed identity and link it to a service. And that's what we're going to do, but we don't have this managed identity yet. So let's switch over to the terminal. Let's deploy our web app, our managed identity, and then we can configure this. Here in the terminal, let's define 3 variables first. So that is the name of the app service, the location, and the resource group. What's important is this name has to be unique. That's why it has my name in it. And this is also the same name we configured in the redirect URL before. So if you change the name, if you want to follow along with the demo, remember to also change it in the app registration. Then with this variable set, we can create our resource group, and then we are going to deploy everything inside this resource group. To do this, I'm going to use Bicep. So I'm going to start the deployment and then we're going to take a look at the Bicep file. But what I'm going to do is I create a deployment group. I deploy it in the resource group we just created with my Bicep file. Then I provide two parameters. The first is the name for my app service, and the second one is the client ID I copied from the app registration. So if you set up your own app registration, you also have to copy and paste the name in there. So now let's start this. And while this is running, let's take a look at this main.bicep file. Here I have to say that this was just generated by Gemini. You can usually see this here by the outdated API definitions. But I think for the demo, it's good enough. So on top, we have here our parameter for the web app name for the Enter client ID. That's the two parameters we provided. Then we're going to create the managed identity. This is the one we're going to use for the federated credentials. Then we create our app service plan. Very basic, I just use a premium P1. Then we create our app service. The only interesting part is this app setting, I would say, is the website of AAD allowed tenants. And here I paste my tenant ID. This means only members of my tenant are allowed to log in. We also have here a reference to the managed identity we've created. So this means our web app has a user-assigned managed identity. Lastly, we have the configuration for our web app. So this is the configuration for the authentication. This is what you usually do in the, or before did in the Azure portal. So here we have, for example, if you are unauthenticated, then we redirect to the login page. So we don't give any error message, we just ask the user to log in. Then again, we have here our Enter client ID, and we have here as allowed audience our URL. This means only our web app is allowed to log in with this app registration. And that's it already. So overall for the demo, I think it's quite simple. In the real world, probably not as simple, but you can follow this pattern. And the most important part is this web app authentication part, where you configure the authentication. As you can see also, the deployment has been finished. So now let's switch back to the Azure portal. Let's see what we deployed, and then let's configure our app registration and test the login. Here in the Azure portal, we can see our resource group. If you open this, we can see we have our app service, the app service plan, and the managed identity. If you open the app service, then we can see under identity that we have here our user-assigned identity, and under authentication, we can see we have the authentication already configured. It's not working yet because we haven't linked the managed identity to the app registration, but we can see everything is set up there. You also have here a link to your app registration, and this is where we're going to switch next. Here in our app registration, we are under the certificates and secrets section, and here we have federated credentials. Then we click on add credentials. We select managed identity. Then I think this is a little bit hidden, but here we have to select our managed identity. I select my subscription, and since I only have one, it's very easy, but you can also search by name. Or you could also do this by code. But since we started in the Azure portal with the app registration, why not finish it in the portal as well? Then we provide a name. I like to have a link of the app name, like secure app, what I used before, and what it is, so federated credentials. Everything else can stay the same. So we add this, and now you can see we have here our federated credentials. It is secure, there's no password, and now it should already work. So let's switch back to our app service. And if we now take a look at our identity, then we can see we have here Federated Credentials. If we open this, we can not see anything there because that's just an Entra, the Federated Credentials. If you're using, for example, AKS, then you would see it there. So this could be confusing, but don't worry, we have set it up, so everything should be good. And to test this, let's go back to our web app. If you scroll all the way up, we can now copy our URL. Then we open a new browser. We paste this. Now it should ask us to log in. There we have it. So now I can log in with my username. Make this larger. So my normal username. Then I provide the password. I approve the login, and now we can see the permission are requested. This is the first time I'm logging in, so I have to give the app registration the permissions to do what it wants to do. So we can open this. We can see here what it's doing. It's allow the app to see your basic profile. And then, since I'm the administrator, I can consent on the behalf of the entire organization. So this means once I accept this, the second time somebody logs in, this permission request won't be visible and they can just log in normally. So I accept this, and then we can see I'm also logged in. So this is just a demo.NET application, but we can see it's working. I have my URL up there, and I just used the Entra authentication. That's everything I want to show you today. So we have seen we can quite easily set up the app service Microsoft Authentication using Bicep. But what we also have seen is that I use the Azure portal to create the app registration. It would be nicer if this was also done with code. Here it depends how your IT department works usually. But from a developer perspective, everything is done by code. All I need is the client ID from the IT department, and I can set up the Entra authentication. This was unfortunately more complicated than I expected with the documentation, but if you're interested in doing everything with code, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you like this kind of videos, please like it, share it. This helps out the channel, and I hope to see you next time with another video.